The video appeared on YouTube on July 17, 2007. At first, it seemed like a joke. 1,500 men in bright orange uniforms, standing in rows in a prison yard. The camera shakes a little. Then the music starts. Those familiar organ notes. Everyone knows them. Michael Jackson's Thriller. And then they dance. Not a few men. Not dozens. 1,500 prisoners, moving as one. Their feet hit the ground at exactly the same time. Their arms swing in perfect rhythm. They spin. They crouch. They do the zombie walk that made the original video famous back in 1983. Within days, millions of people around the world had watched it. Within weeks, it became one of the most watched videos on the entire internet. The dancing prisoners of Cebu, Philippines, had become famous. But this story isn't really about dancing. It's about what happens when the world starts watching. If you're enjoying this documentary, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what prison reform means to you. The prison sits on top of a hill in Cebu City, in the heart of the Philippines. Through the barred windows, you can see the ocean in the distance. The building is called CPDRC, that's short for Cebu Provincial Detention and Rehabilitation Center. It's a maximum security prison, the kind of place that holds people accused of very serious crimes. In 2007, more than 300 of the men inside were waiting for their murder trials. Others faced charges for drugs, robbery, and other crimes. Many of them hadn't even been found guilty yet. They were just waiting. Some had been waiting for years. In the Philippines, if you're arrested and can't afford bail, you wait in prison until your trial. For some people, that wait never seems to end. The cells are cramped. Narrow wooden bunk beds line the walls, stacked 3 high. The men hang sheets between the beds to create a little bit of privacy. Cardboard boxes are glued to the walls to use as shelves. In one cell, 12 men share the space. In another, there might be 15. It's loud, it's hot, and for most of the day, there's nothing to do. Before the dancing, problems were really heavy to bear, said one prisoner named Crisanto. We just get our food and go back to our cell. If we don't have anything to do, we just talk, day after day, month after month, year after year. That's how things were at CPDRC before 2006, before a man named Byron Garcia arrived. Byron Garcia wasn't a regular prison guard. He came from one of the most powerful political families in Cebu province. His sister, Gwendolyn Garcia, was the governor. She controlled the province. And in 2006, she gave her brother a job. She made him the security advisor for the prison. Byron looked at the 1,500 men locked inside those walls and saw a problem. These men had nothing to do. When people have nothing to do, they get angry. They form gangs. They fight. They hurt each other. The prison was filled with violence, corruption, and illegal activity. Something needed to change. But Byron Garcia didn't think like most prison officials. He thought about a movie he had seen, The Shawshank Redemption. In that movie, there's a scene where a prisoner plays beautiful music over the prison speakers. For just a few minutes, all the other prisoners stop what they're doing. They listen. They feel something they hadn't felt in a long time. They feel human. Byron wanted to create that same feeling. But instead of just playing music, he had a different idea. He would make the prisoners move to it. One day in 2006, Byron walked into the prison yard. He set up speakers. He pressed play. The song was Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. The music blasted through the yard. The prisoners looked at each other. What was happening? Then Byron started to dance. The prisoners watched. Some of them laughed. Some thought he was crazy. But slowly, a few of them started to move. Then a few more, and more. Soon, dozens of prisoners were dancing in the yard. Byron saw something in that moment. These men weren't angry criminals when they danced. They were just people. People who could work together. People who could create something. He decided to make it official. Every morning at 6 o'clock, the prisoners would exercise, but not with push-ups or running. They would dance together, in formation, like a team. At first, the prisoners hated the idea. When Byron brought in a choreographer to teach them dance moves, the prisoners threw their slippers at him. Dancing? In prison? It seemed like a punishment. It seemed like they were being made fun of. But Byron didn't give up. He kept the program going, and slowly, the prisoners started to change their minds. They practiced for hours. 4 hours every single day. They learned the moves to songs like In the Navy and YMCA by the Village People. They marched. They clapped. They moved in perfect rows, like soldiers. But they weren't fighting. They were dancing. Then Byron had another idea. He set up a video camera in the prison yard. He recorded the prisoners dancing. And in 2006, he started uploading the videos to YouTube. YouTube was still new back then. Most people used it to share funny cat videos or clips from TV shows. Prison videos? Nobody had seen anything like this before. Byron uploaded several videos. People started watching. A few thousand views. Then 10,000. The numbers kept growing. But Byron wanted to do something bigger, something that would really get the world's attention. He chose the perfect song, Thriller by Michael Jackson, the most famous dance video ever made. Could prisoners really pull it off? They practiced for weeks, 1,500 men, learning every step, the zombie walk, the arm movements, the turns. It had to be perfect. And then they filmed it. The video starts with those organ notes. The camera shows rows and rows of men in orange uniforms. They stand still, waiting. Then the beat drops, and they explode into movement. One prisoner plays Michael Jackson's role. His name is Crisanto Nier. He's been in prison for 5 years, waiting for his trial on drug charges. He loved Michael Jackson since he was young. When he was in high school, he danced in a group. Now, he was getting to perform again. In prison, another prisoner plays the girlfriend's role from the original video. His name is Wenjil Resane. He's openly gay, a former pizza chef. He wears makeup and lipstick during performances. He shares a cell with 11 other gay inmates. He's been waiting 3 years for his trial. Both men are just waiting to find out if they'll be found guilty or innocent, waiting to know if they'll ever be free. But when they dance, they're not prisoners anymore. They're performers. On July 17, 2007, Byron Garcia uploaded the Thriller video to YouTube. At first, just a few people watched it. Then a few hundred. Then thousands. By the end of the first week, millions of people had seen it. The video was spreading across the internet like wildfire. News channels picked it up. Newspapers wrote about it. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the dancing prisoners of Cebu. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment about your thoughts on this unique approach to prison life. Time magazine ranked it as the 5th most popular viral video of 2007. The description they used was shocking. Orange jumpsuited accused murderers, rapists, and drug dealers paid homage to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Accused murderers, rapists, drug dealers. These weren't nice people who had made small mistakes. These were men charged with serious crimes, and the world was watching them dance. Visitors started coming to the prison. The prison set up viewing platforms around the exercise yard. Once a month, the prisoners would perform for an audience. Families came to watch. Tourists came from other countries. People took photos with the prisoners. They bought souvenir prison t-shirts. The prisoners became celebrities. Crisanto Nier and Wenjil Resane were recognized all over the world. Their faces appeared in news articles. TV crews came to interview them. If I was not in prison, I would not be famous, Wenjil said with a smile. Crisanto felt the same way, but for a different reason. His young son, Christopher, had only ever known his father as a prisoner. But now, when people looked at Crisanto, they didn't just see a criminal. They saw a performer. They saw someone who could create something beautiful. Dancing takes our minds away from our problems, Crisanto explained. Our bodies became more healthy. We are being rehabilitated in a good way. It seemed like a perfect story. A prison full of violent criminals, transformed by the power of dance. Brotherhood, discipline, rehabilitation. The kind of story that makes people believe in second chances. But something didn't add up. CPDRC was supposed to hold 1,600 prisoners at most. That was its maximum capacity. But when the Thriller video was filmed, there were already more than 1,500 men inside. The cells were packed. 10, 12, 15 men in spaces meant for 6. And despite all the dancing, despite all the positive news coverage, the prison was still a maximum security facility. It still had gangs. it still had violence. In 2009, on the anniversary of a shooting between rival gangs inside the prison, Byron had the inmates perform a dance to Grease Lightning. One of the lead dancers was a gang leader named Arabo. It was his last performance before he was transferred to another prison to serve 3 life sentences for a triple murder. 90 years minimum before he could even apply for parole. These weren't reformed men. They were still criminals, still dangerous, still locked in cells at night. So what was really happening at CPDRC? Was this rehabilitation? Or was it something else? Some experts started asking questions. Professors who studied prisons said that dancing doesn't actually help people change. It doesn't stop them from committing crimes again after they get out. One professor said it plainly: the dancing does not rehabilitate these inmates. And then there were the darker rumors, whispers that the prisoners didn't actually have a choice, that they were forced to dance, that if they refused, they would disappear, that practice sessions lasted 10 hours, not 4, that men were dancing in cheap prison sandals until their feet bled. Byron Garcia denied everything. He gave interviews saying that nobody was forced to participate, that the prisoners loved dancing, that it gave them purpose. He said, "If we make jails a living hell for the prisoners, then we might just be sending out devils once they are released and reintegrated into society." The prisoners backed him up. In every interview, they said they were proud of what they were doing. They said dancing saved them. But were they telling the truth? Or were they saying what they needed to say? The YouTube videos kept coming. The prisoners performed dances to Queen, to the Black Eyed Peas, to Bruno Mars, to K-pop songs. They held up pictures of the Dalai Lama, Pope John Paul II, and Mahatma Gandhi during performances. They sang songs about peace and rehabilitation, and the views kept climbing. Millions and millions of people watched. The advertising money from YouTube started rolling in. Who is getting that money? Byron Garcia controlled the account. He posted the videos. Was the money going to help the prisoners? Or was someone else benefiting? In February 2010, something strange happened. Byron's sister, Governor Gwendolyn Garcia, suddenly ordered the dancing program to stop. She said there needed to be an investigation into where all the donation money was going. People from around the world had been sending money to support the dancing prisoners, but nobody seemed to know where that money was. The program was put on hold. The choreographer quit. Byron Garcia's contract wasn't renewed. But the public loved the dancing prisoners. People demanded that the program come back, so eventually, it did. But Byron was gone. The videos stopped being public events. Something had changed. Years passed. The world moved on. But inside CPDRC, things were getting worse. Much worse. And that's when a new person entered the story. Someone who knew the prison from the inside. Someone who had been a prisoner himself. His name was Marco Torral. And when he became the new security advisor in 2015, the real story of CPDRC was about to be revealed. Marco Torral knew what it felt like to sleep on concrete. He knew the smell of sweat and fear in an overcrowded cell. He knew what happened to people who couldn't pay bribes, who didn't have connections, who weren't born into powerful families. Because he had been one of those people. In 2002, Marco was arrested in a sports complex in Mandaue City. The police said he was selling drugs. Less than a gram of shabu, they claimed. Someone had told them about the sale. That someone was a woman, a friend, or so he thought. Marco insisted it was a setup. But in the Philippines, what you say doesn't always matter. What matters is what the police write in their reports. And the police had written enough to send Marco to prison for the rest of his life. He was sentenced to life in prison. His son was a toddler at the time. Marco ended up at CPDRC, the same prison where tourists would soon come to watch prisoners dance. But back then, in 2002, there was no dancing. There was only survival. And to survive in CPDRC, you needed to join the gang. The gang was called Batang Cebu. It wasn't optional. Every single prisoner who walked through those gates automatically became a member. It didn't matter if you wanted to join. It didn't matter if you disagreed with what they did. You were BC. That was the rule. Batang Cebu ran everything inside those walls. The guards? They mostly stayed in their offices. They handed out food. They counted prisoners. But they didn't control what happened inside the cells. That was the gang's job. The gang had leaders. They had rules. They had a system for settling arguments, distributing food, and dealing with prisoners who caused problems. If you broke the rules, you faced the gang's justice, not the official prison system. The gang. Marco spent 7 years in CPDRC. 7 years learning how the prison really worked. 7 years watching Byron Garcia start the dancing program. 7 years being part of a system that the outside world couldn't see. Then, in 2009, something unexpected happened. Marco won his appeal. The court looked at his case again and decided he shouldn't serve life in prison. They let him go. Most people who leave prison want to forget it ever happened. They want to move on, start over, pretend those years didn't exist. Marco did that at first. He moved to the mountains. He avoided people. He ran a small farm. He raised pigs. He was ashamed to show his face in the city. But someone hadn't forgotten about Marco. Someone who had known him years before, when they were both students at the University of the Philippines in Cebu. Her name was Jobella, and in 2013, her husband became the new governor of Cebu province. His name was Hilario Davide III. Governor Davide invited Marco to dinner. They talked. Davide knew Marco's past. He knew about the drug conviction. He knew about the prison time. But Davide had a strange idea. He thought Marco's past might actually be useful. Davide asked Marco to become the prison consultant for CPDRC. Think about that for a moment. A convicted drug dealer, someone who spent 7 years as a prisoner, now being asked to help run the very prison where he had been locked up. Marco wasn't sure at first. He told the governor, "My life is surrounded by rumors. People will talk. They won't trust me." But Davide didn't care about what people would say. He wanted someone who understood the prisoners, someone who had been where they were, someone who knew how things really worked inside those walls. In 2015, Marco Torral became the new security advisor for CPDRC. Byron Garcia was gone. The dancing program was still happening, but it wasn't the same. The prison was facing new problems, bigger problems. Problems that had nothing to do with dancing. President Rodrigo Duterte had just won the election in May 2016, and Duterte had made a promise to the Filipino people, a promise that would change everything. He said he would end the drug problem in the Philippines. He said he would do it in 6 months. He said he would kill drug dealers and users if he had to. Some people cheered. Finally, someone was going to be tough on crime. Finally, someone was going to clean up the streets. Other people were horrified. You can't just kill people without a trial. That's not justice. That's murder. But Duterte didn't care what his critics said. When he became president on June 30, 2016, he did exactly what he promised. Police started arresting people. Thousands of people. Tens of thousands. Most of them were poor. Most of them came from the slums. And most of them were accused of using or selling drugs. But the arrests were only part of it. People were also being killed, shot in the streets, found in alleys with their hands tied behind their backs and tape over their mouths. Bodies wrapped in cardboard with signs that said, "drug dealer" or "pusher." The police said they killed suspects who resisted arrest. They said they were protecting themselves. They claimed every single death was justified. But human rights groups didn't believe them. They interviewed witnesses. They talked to families, and the same stories kept appearing. Police raiding homes at night. No warnings, no arrests, just gunshots. And when the police left, there were bodies. What do you think about prison reform in situations like this? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. In the first 6 months of Duterte's presidency, more than 7,000 people died. An average of 34 people every single day. The ones who weren't killed were arrested. And where do arrested people go? Prison. The Philippine prison system was already overcrowded before Duterte became president. Prisons built for 20,000 people were holding over 100,000. Cells meant for 6 prisoners had 15 or 20 crammed inside. Men slept in shifts because there wasn't enough floor space for everyone to lie down at the same time. But after Duterte's war on drugs started, it got much, much worse. Thousands of new prisoners flooded into the system every week. Most of them hadn't even been found guilty yet. They were just waiting for their trials. Some of them had been waiting for years. One prisoner had been in jail for 9 years without being convicted. Another had already served 15 years, even though his sentence was only 4 years. Justice delayed is justice denied, Marco Torrell said. At CPDRC, the overcrowding became unbearable. The prison was built to hold 1,600 prisoners at most. By 2015, it had 2,300, and the number kept climbing. The cells were packed. The yard was packed. There wasn't enough food. There wasn't enough water. Disease spread easily in those conditions. Fights broke out. The violence that the dancing program was supposed to reduce was coming back. And drugs? Despite all the arrests and killings happening outside the prison walls, drugs were still flowing inside. Prisoners could still get shabu. Dealers were still operating. Some of the biggest drug operations in the entire country were being run from inside prison cells. Marco knew this because he had lived it. He knew that the official prison system, the guards, the wardens, the rules on paper wasn't the real power. The real power was the gang, and the gang controlled the drug trade. When Marco took over as security advisor, he faced an impossible situation. The prison was bursting with new prisoners. The guards were overwhelmed. The system was broken, and he was an ex-convict trying to bridge the gap between the prisoners and the officials. Some people thought Marco was perfect for the job. He understood the prisoners. He could talk to them as equals. He had been through what they were going through. He could make them trust him. Other people thought Marco was dangerous. How could you put a former drug dealer in charge of a prison full of drug dealers? What if he was corrupt? What if he was still connected to the criminal world? What if he used his position to help the wrong people? Marco walked into CPDRC with a gun on his hip and tattoos covering his arms. He looked more like a prisoner than a prison official. And in a way, that was the point. He was one of them. He spoke their language. He knew their world. In 2016, right when things were getting worse, a documentary filmmaker arrived at CPDRC. Her name was Michelle Josu. She was Filipino-American, born to immigrant parents. She had won awards for her previous documentaries, and she wanted to make a film about the famous dancing prisoners. She thought it would be a simple, inspiring story, a feel-good documentary about how dancing changed lives and brought hope to a dark place. But Michelle arrived at the worst possible time. Duterte's drug war was exploding across the Philippines. CPDRC was filling up with new prisoners every day, and Marco Torrell had just taken over. What Michelle thought would be a movie about dancing became something completely different. Over the next 3 years, she and her camera crew witnessed things that most documentaries never show. They watched as the prison population swelled beyond control. They filmed inside the cells where men were packed like sardines. They saw the reality behind the cheerful YouTube videos and the smiling performances. And Marco? He let them film everything, even things that made him look bad, even things that raised serious questions. One day, a prisoner escaped. He simply walked out of the prison disguised as a visitor. It was embarrassing. It was a security failure, and it made Marco look incompetent. Marco got a tip that the escaped prisoner was hiding at his relative's house in a rural area. So Marco gathered a team, put on body armor, grabbed guns, and the documentary crew followed them. They raided the house, guns drawn, ready for a fight. But the prisoner wasn't there. So what did Marco do? He took off his body armor. He hired some local boys to catch wild chickens. And he threw a barbecue party for the family and neighbors, right there, as if the whole thing was just a casual visit. The documentary crew didn't know what to make of it. Was this how prison consultants were supposed to act? Was Marco being friendly? Or was this something else? Then there was the discipline system, the gang system, the punishments. Michelle and her crew heard screams coming from behind closed doors. They knew what was happening. Prisoners were being beaten. It was called tackle, a punishment where prisoners were held down on a bench while someone hit their legs with a wooden paddle or stick. Hard. Again and again. Usually, the beatings happened in private. But one day, Marco decided to do it in front of the cameras. Michael Huff was the sound recordist for the documentary. He later described what he saw. The prisoner was laid face down on a bench. 2 men sat on him to hold him down, one on his shoulders, one on his feet. Then a very strong man brought the paddle down with full force on the back of the prisoner's legs. On the first hit, the prisoner's body jerked violently. After the third or fourth hit, he passed out from the pain. It was brutal, Huff said. None of us were ready for that. But Marco defended the system. He said it was fair. He said prisoners had a right to defend themselves before being punished. He said there was a jury of other prisoners who decided if the punishment was deserved. He said it was better than sending prisoners to solitary confinement or transferring them to even worse prisons. Was he right? Or was this just violence with a different name? The documentary crew kept filming. They saw more and more. The conditions got worse. The political situation got messier. Because there was something else happening, something that most people didn't know about. There was a power struggle going on behind the scenes. A political war between two families. On one side, Governor Hilario Davide III, who had appointed Marco Torral. On the other side, the Garcia family. Byron Garcia and his sister, Gwendolyn Garcia, who had lost power when Davide became governor. Gwendolyn Garcia wanted her position back. She wanted to be governor again, and she hated that someone else had taken control of CPDRC, the prison that her brother had made famous, the prison that had brought international attention and money to Cebu. As Marco's influence with the Davide administration grew, his relationship with the prison's official staff got worse. The guards didn't like him. Some of them were loyal to the old system, to the Garcia family. They saw Marco as an outsider, a criminal who didn't belong. Michael Huff, the sound recordist, said something strange. As the situation got worse with the official staff, I honestly felt safer inside the prison with the inmates than outside with the administration. Think about that. A documentary crew felt safer with convicted criminals than with the people who were supposed to be running the prison. In July 2016, things came to a head. An inmate escaped. Then Marco fired a warning shot when he caught prisoners gambling. The official reports made it sound like Marco was out of control, like he was dangerous, like he was violating the rules. On August 6, 2016, the Provincial Board called Marco and the jail warden to answer questions about violations. They wanted explanations. They wanted accountability. Marco resigned before the hearing could happen. When reporters asked him why, he only said one thing: "You better ask the governor." Governor Davide issued a statement. He said Marco told him he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. He said they valued due process. He made it sound like Marco had quit on his own. But what really happened? Why did Marco leave so suddenly? What pressure was he under? Who was pressuring him? The documentary crew had been filming for months. They had seen things that raised serious questions. They had watched Marco operate in ways that blurred the lines between helping prisoners and controlling them. They had seen violence. They had seen corruption. They had seen a system that claimed to be about rehabilitation, but looked more like survival. And now, the man at the center of it all was gone. But the story wasn't over. Because what Michelle Josue captured on film was about to reveal something even darker. Something that went beyond one man, one prison, one dancing program. It was about what happens when a country decides that some lives matter less than others. When the poor are treated as disposable. When justice becomes something you can only afford if you're rich. When prisons become warehouses for people society has decided aren't worth saving. The Netflix documentary that came out in 2019 was called Happy Jail, but there was nothing happy about what Michelle filmed. It was raw. It was honest. It was uncomfortable. And it forced people to ask a question they didn't want to answer. Were the dancing prisoners of CPDRC ever really happy? Or were they just doing what they needed to do to survive? When Michelle Josue's documentary Happy Jail appeared on Netflix in August 2019, viewers around the world finally saw what had been hidden behind those viral YouTube videos. The 5-part series showed a prison system that wasn't about rehabilitation at all. It was about survival. The cameras captured everything. Prisoners sleeping side by side on concrete floors because there wasn't enough room for everyone to lie down. Cells built for 6 people holding 20. Men waiting years, sometimes a decade, for trials that might never come. A young prisoner who had been locked up for 9 years without being convicted of anything. Another who had served 15 years when his original sentence was only 4. And through it all, the prisoners kept dancing. But now, people understood why. Dancing wasn't about being happy. It was about staying human in a place designed to break you. The documentary revealed something else too. The political war between families. The Garcia family on one side, Governor Davide on the other, both claiming they wanted to help the prisoners, both fighting for control of a prison that had become famous. And caught in the middle, thousands of men who had no power at all. Michelle Josue, the filmmaker, said something important in interviews after the documentary came out. She said most of the prisoners at CPDRC weren't even criminals yet. They were accused, detained, waiting. According to the law, they were still innocent until proven guilty, but they were being treated like they had already been convicted. It wasn't our job to judge anyone, Michelle explained. We were there to tell their story. Everyone deserves dignity and respect. The documentary showed Marco Torral's time at the prison, his attempts to bring order, his harsh methods, the beatings that happened under his watch. But it also showed something that mainstream news didn't talk about. Marco wasn't the only problem. He was just one piece of a much bigger, broken system. When Marco resigned in August 2016, he left behind questions nobody wanted to answer. Was he pushed out? Did the political pressure get too much? Did he see something he wasn't supposed to see? He told reporters to ask the governor, but the governor said Marco couldn't handle the pressure. Who was telling the truth? Nobody knows for sure. What we do know is this: after Marco left, things got worse. In 2019, Gwendolyn Garcia won the election and became governor of Cebu province again. 7 years after losing power, she was back, and one of the first places she visited was CPDRC. The prisoners performed for her. They danced to Michael Jackson. They moved in perfect rows, just like they had in 2007. Governor Garcia watched them with tears in her eyes. She was moved. She said she remembered the old days when the prison was famous. But then she said something surprising. She told reporters that dancing would have to take a back seat. The real problem was overcrowding. The real problem was that the prison was bursting with prisoners. CPDRC was built to hold 1,600 people. In 2019, it had over 2,000. At one point, it had reached almost 4,000. 4,000 people in a space meant for 1,600. Most of them, drug charges. Nearly 70% of everyone locked up in Philippine prisons was there because of drugs. Because of President Duterte's war on drugs. Because of a policy that treated poor people like they were disposable. Garcia promised to fix the overcrowding problem. She promised to get more lawyers to help speed up trials. She promised to build new facilities. She even said she might give the prison to the national government because it was too much of a headache. But she also brought back the dancing. In 2022, she announced that the Dancing Inmates program would return. It would bring tourists. It would bring money. It would make Cebu famous again. The prisoners danced. Visitors came. YouTube views climbed. Everything looked the same as it did in 2007. But nothing had really changed. The cells were still overcrowded. Trials were still delayed. Prisoners were still waiting. Some for months. Some for years. Some for decades. Crisanto Nier, the man who played Michael Jackson in the famous Thriller video, was released in 2010 after waiting 5 years for his trial on drug charges. He had become world famous while locked in a cell. When he got out, people recognized him on the street. Wenjil Risane, the prisoner who played the girlfriend role, also got out. He went back to making pizza. He went back to his life. But the memory of those years in prison never left him. For them, the story had a somewhat happy ending. But for thousands of others, there was no ending at all. Just waiting. Just dancing. Just surviving. Today, the Philippine prison system is still one of the most overcrowded in the world. The country ranks alongside Haiti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. Prisons built for 20,000 people hold over 100,000. The jail occupation rate stands at over 300% in many facilities. The United Nations has called the conditions inhumane. A Philippine Supreme Court justice used that exact word, inhumane. But there are some signs of hope. Small changes, slow progress. The Office on Drugs and Crime is working with the Philippine government to reform the prison system. They're helping to build new facilities that actually follow international rules about prisoner treatment. They're creating programs that let prisoners reduce their sentences by reading books and showing good behavior. In 2024, the Philippines opened its first model prison in Marawi City. It was built with human rights in mind. Proper ventilation, enough space, libraries, training programs. The government is also reviewing drug laws. Experts say that locking people up for minor drug offenses doesn't make communities safer. It just fills prisons with people who need help, not punishment. In 2024 alone, over 7,000 prisoners were released from Philippine prisons. Some finished their sentences. Some were found innocent. Some earned early release through good behavior. The system is changing, slowly, too slowly for the people still inside, but it's moving. As for CPDRC, in 2023, the prison population finally dropped, down from nearly 4,000 to around 900. The facility started accepting new prisoners again, but with limits. No more overcrowding, no more packing people like sardines. The dancing program is still going. Prisoners still perform, but now it's optional. Nobody is forced to dance anymore. About half the prisoners choose to participate. The other half do other activities. Byron Garcia, the man who started it all, hasn't been back to CPDRC in years. His YouTube account still exists. The old videos are still there. Millions of views. Millions of people who watched those prisoners dance and thought they were happy. The Thriller video from 2007? It has over 60 million views now. It remains one of the most watched prison videos in internet history. But if you go back and watch it now, knowing what you know, it looks different. You see the orange uniforms and remember they're accused of murder, rape, and drug crimes. You see them moving in perfect formation, and remember they practiced for hours in cheap sandals until their feet bled. You see them smiling and remember that some of them had been waiting 5, 10, 15 years for trials that might never come. You realize that what looked like joy might have been survival. What looked like rehabilitation might have been control. What looked like dancing might have been the only way to feel human in a place that treated people like numbers. The story of CPDRC isn't really about dancing. It never was. It's about what happens when society decides that some people don't matter. When poor people get arrested and rich people walk free. When justice takes so long that it stops being justice at all. When prisons become warehouses for people we'd rather forget. It's about the 1,500 men who danced in that yard in 2007. Men who were accused but not convicted. Detained but not sentenced. Forgotten but not gone. And it's about all the people still waiting in prisons around the world. Waiting for trials. Waiting for justice. Waiting for someone to remember that they're human beings who deserve dignity, fair treatment, and a second chance. The cameras have mostly stopped filming at CPDRC now. The tourists have moved on to the next viral sensation. The world has forgotten about the dancing prisoners of Cebu. But inside those walls, men are still waking up every morning, still eating meals in overcrowded cells, still wondering if today will be the day their trial finally happens, still wondering if they'll ever be free. Some of them dance, some of them don't, but all of them wait, and they'll keep waiting until the system changes, until the world remembers that justice delayed is justice denied, until we decide that every person, no matter what they're accused of, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity. That's the real story of CPDRC. Not the viral videos, not the spectacular performances, not the millions of views on YouTube. The real story is about the people we don't see when the cameras stop rolling. The people still inside, still waiting, still hoping, still human. What do you think about prison reform? Should prisoners have access to programs like dancing and rehabilitation? Or should prisons focus only on punishment? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you learned something new from this documentary, hit that subscribe button so you never miss our deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because these stories matter. These people matter. And the more we talk about them, the harder it becomes to ignore them. Thanks for watching.